So Alex, like, let's get a little rundown first and foremost. What is your business? What is Absolute Driven Performance? What do you specialize in? What is your company?
My company is Absolute Driven Performance. We are a primarily 2JZ and import performance shop specializing in Mark IV Supras.
Now, tuning, I mean, you guys do everything here, right? You are I call it nut to butt, like you can do everything in and out here, right? Within reason, I would say.
Yeah, we do all fabrication is in-house, tuning is in-house, everything engine program in-house. There's very few things that we don't do in-house.
I guess we could say the only thing you don't do is a physical machining, right? I mean, just like they would say physical machining of the block or like of the head of something, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of hard to have all in one, especially to then do, all the mechanical stuff. There's very few places in this country that even do that.
I'm not a machinist,
yeah.
So I work with a machine shop. I think that's pretty industry standard.
Yeah, of course.
I trust the professionals at their career choice.
So, on that fact, where can they get a hold of you? Go absolutedriven.com, absolutedrivenperformance.com, or...
You can find us on Facebook at Absolute Driven Performance, on Instagram. We pretty much only are online on the social medias. I'm hoping this year maybe to get a website going. It's as the business grows, my time gets thinner and thinner, and unfortunately, it's one of those things that I haven't got around to having an actual website yet.
So that's the best place to read Facebook or there, or they can give a call to try and set up a meet or to set up a time to maybe get their super in here.
Absolutely, or a consultation. Yeah.
All right, guys. So Alex, we already talked about the diff, everything else. Now it's time to talk about the race car. This is the thing that you saw at World Cup Finals, which is this clip here. That, was fast, but you had a few issues, which we'll kind of go over the issues you had and kind of what the plan is for 2024. Yeah, 2024. Probably help if I remember what year it is. So let's go over the car.
Over the car, let's talk about what kind of happened last year with Turtle Power here, and let's actually talk about the name, what happened in 2023, what your goals were, and what your goals are for 2024 now.
Okay, so the name comes from the car being incredibly slow. Actually, no, I'm a big Ninja Turtle fan. I was when I was growing up, and the car is definitely Ninja Turtle green. It looks just like a Ninja Turtle, so that's the name. There was a lot of cool names out there that were already taken, so but thankfully I lucked out and my number one choice had not been taken yet as a race car. So Turtle Power was what I named the car, sort of tongue-in-cheek. If people didn't know the Ninja Turtles, they would just think it's funny that I'm making fun of the car being slow.
Yeah.
It's Turtle Power, but if people do know Ninja Turtles, they'll know right away.
Which, I'll show this here too, but right in the headlight here, he's got a Ninja Turtle is stuck in the turbo inlet pipe, which I think is the coolest thing. Yeah. So, this is the chassis. Was this original turbo or NA car when you got it?
This is an original TT Auto.
Okay, so this is a real TT Auto car, which makes it more special because is this Deep Jewel Green or IGM?
DJG.
Okay, it's a DJG car, which is, if you guys see it, I remember last year, like, seeing it in line at World Cup Finals and comparing this car. There's other nice cars, don't get me wrong, but this sort of looked like a legitimate street show car, even under the engine, which I'll show you guys here. And compared to everything else, everyone's like, good Lord, man, you're racing this car. It's just, guys, I hope you get to go to World Cup Finals or some other race and just see this car, because it is literally that clean, especially for a race car. It's just, it doesn't look like a traditional race car because most are beat up, right? But to get into, what were your goals for last year and where, I know you wanted to go to World Cup Finals, but how did we get to that point? How did you get to going to World Cup Finals?
Yeah, so I finished up the car mid last year and had the goal of making it into World Cup Finals Mean Street class. And the road to get there was try to get out there and test with the car. At that time, the car was making around 1,000 to 1,200 horsepower, somewhere in there, depending on the tune-up and the way, whether I was locking up or not. But the car was on a different turbo setup. I had to qualify. If anybody knows how you get into World Cup Finals, there's a pre-qualification number. For you have to have video of your car doing that.
Yeah, they take it very serious, very serious.
And it's to legitimize, to be a a barrier to entry that legitimizes you as a real racer that can really race in this class and hopefully be competitive in this class. So what I did was I just got out there and started testing. We were finding what worked and didn't work, both with the suspension, with the transmission. It's basically, you know, because the car is still an A340 car, which is another thing a lot of people might not realize. This car does not run a TH400, it runs an A340. It's all controlled right through the AEM V2.
Which that's the one thing I wanted to bring up too. I hope I'm not cutting off, but I need people to understand like that is a factory Toyota Trans. With it, what I mean by factory, that came in the car, but it is built. So I guess I should have prefaced. We should probably talk about those things, but it does have a Toyota Trans in it, so which is wild to be competing at that level. Is very. I mean, it's very hard. Which you can get into that too.
Yeah. So that transmission fits so nicely in a Supra because it was, you know,
built for it,
and it just works when used correctly. But just like any car, when you freshly get it together and you go testing, you know, you're going to find what works and what doesn't work. You're going to have to start making adjustments, changing things both in the tune, in the suspension, the weight of the car, everything. You're just figuring stuff out. So at that time, the car was on a Gen 2 7675, and we went an 854 after a month or two of having some track time to test with the car and figure out what worked. I made a string of passes that were very close to qualifying for World Cup on that 7675, and then I changed the launch control setup on the car to let it come off the two-step on a switch rather than by mile an hour, and completely changed the way the car went.
Sure.
And improved the 60-foot drastically, and really kind of took it to the next level, and right away the car responded and went like 0.2 faster than it had ever gone just by making that change. And then,
which is huge.
Yeah. And so we got it. That at the time, World Cup was already sold out for Mean Street. So by the time I ran the qualifying number, I had to message Jason Miller and ask, you know, if I could get on the wait list, and I sent in my proof video and all that stuff. I literally didn't find out that I was going to get into World Cup until like a month before World Cup.
Yeah.
Which is hard because I needed a class legal turbo. The 7675 is not a class legal turbo in Mean Street.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Unless your car weighs a lot. And my car didn't weigh a lot.
Unless you have a Hellcat. You're not qualifying.
Yeah, so, and to be honest with you, the 7675 Gen 2 is very limited in power compared to the next gens that were out and the R versions of the next gen. So I had to get a class legal turbo. I had to custom order it because I needed a different backside. Because again, the car doesn't leave on a trans brake.
Yeah.
It's leaving on a foot brake. And so I'm always trying to figure out what turbo works best for the way this car needs to work. And so the turbo that works best on this car right now is a 67.9 Next Gen R with an 80 millimeter turbine. So
is that on the car currently?
It's currently on the car.
Which we'll show that here in a minute, guys. So we'll pan over to that here. But go ahead and continue there. Sorry, Alex.
The 80 millimeter turbine was the choice because the 67.9 already existed, but it had an 85 backside in sportsman housing for like sport front wheel drive, you know, racing and stuff like that. But I wanted to go divided, as tight of an AR as I could, and 80 millimeter because when I'm trying to stage the car, it needs to be able to come up on RPM, and it needs to actually get the turbo on board before I fully stage the car and get into the second yellow bulb. I have to be all the way ready to launch. So it's sort of without nitrous. Both the Mean Street class and World Cup for 6-cylinder rear-wheel drive is nitrous prohibited. The next step up, which is the cars that go 760s, they're also nitrous prohibited on 6-cylinder rear-wheel drive. So even if the car was faster than it is today, I still couldn't run nitrous and run that at World Cup.
So really you're almost handicapping yourself by having an A340, but you're trying to prove a point with the transmission also. You're trying to show that it can be done.
Somehow, some way, it's almost like there's a little bit of a silver lining with an A340 is because you don't have a trans brake to leave on, you get a 100-pound weight deduction.
Okay, I didn't know that.
So any auto trans car with trans brake is a 100-pound deduction, which is great because this car runs a 3/4 stroker, which is a 100-pound increase that I have to be. So they offset each other because I'm not leaving on a trans brake.
Yeah.
So it was pretty cool. So we found out a month. I messaged Jason. I said, hey, is there any chance I'm getting in? I need to get this turbo immediately if I am. And he basically messaged me back, hey, I'm moving some spots around. I just had a spot open up in Mean Street. I just looked at your video. You're in.
Okay.
And then it was like, hit the green light button, like,
Go,
order, get this to here. Yeah.
Because, I mean, what people don't realize is, like you had told me this too, like, when those new turbos come out, they just got there, and it's hard. You don't even get a chance. Even if you had the chance, those turbos weren't even ready to test with, even if you wanted to. They always wait till the last minute, so you're getting it a month before that, and that also adds headache to get it set up and get going.
Unless there's no rule book change, right? Because, July 1st, Jason Miller, for those of you who don't know, Jason Miller's the one who puts on World Cup Finals. Right. It's his event, Miller Brothers Productions, Maryland International Raceway. He releases the rules July 1st, and if there's a turbo change up of any turbo sizes in any of these classes that require any custom compressors or anything like that for precision to make, they don't find out till July 1st, and the race is November, the first week in November.
Right.
So, like, they have to make a turbo right away. Like, they don't know what's going to be. So if there's no rule changes, you're okay. But if there's rule changes and turbo sizes change, you don't find out what turbo you can run in that class by your weight or whatever until July 1st. I mean, it's sort of like...
That's gotta be so rough. Well, everybody. That's hard.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of these guys, see, this was my first year. It'll be easier every other year, but most of these guys, they've been in a certain class, or they've been a part of World Cup at different, for many years, so they sort of have a better beat on it. I didn't. I was late to the party, and so I had to figure out really quickly, how am I going to get this turbo here, got it on the car, broken input shaft on the dyno with it, like, immediately. Like, had to get the trans out of it, ship it to ATF, pull my other stage 4 off the shelf, that was my backup trans, put it in the car, new torque converter, I had to just do all this stuff, and then dyno it again, make sure I'm still okay, it's not just going to snap the input shaft, because I was like, maybe I shouldn't put it on the dyno, I'll just take it to the racetrack, but then I'm like, nah, if it's going to break it on the dyno when I'm not launching the car, I kind of want to know now, so and then that one dynoed fine, so I don't know if maybe all the times I was racing the car previously, maybe I hurt the input shaft. It's possible. I mean, Jason at ATF Speed said that they've done a lot of metallurgy testing on those input shafts, and the different batches of those input shafts, you have stronger ones and you have weaker ones. He says you don't know which one you have until you break it. Yeah. Like, if you have a strong one, it'll probably live. It can live, like in Pedro's car, all the way down into the deep 7s. Yeah. Before you just keep breaking. He says at that point you also can start breaking the output shaft. So
it's getting to the point where you're pretty much using a shell of it, and then everything inside is just completely custom.
Yeah,
but I mean, you're saying that's how Turbo 400s are. I mean, if we're being honest, that's how the Turbo 400s are. I mean, you're literally using a cast shell, and everything inside is completely gutted. So,
and a lot of the big boys aren't even using an actual GM case anyway. They're using a Reed case or a billet case. I mean,
they call it a Turbo 400, but there's nothing left of it.
It's Turbo 400 architecture. Yeah. It's like
a billet UJ. It's architecture, or a new, the new Dart block. It's the architecture, but it's all been replaced.
It's not Toyota's.
Yeah.
It's somebody else's.
Bingo.
It's based off the architecture, original architecture of Toyota's, but it's not a Toyota anymore. Okay. So, in qualifying, the car right away was faster. The new turbo setup, the 67.9R 80mm turbine is a bad girl. Yeah. Compared to the Gen 2 7675 that was on the car that qualified. It qualified at an 854, and when I put this turbo on the car and took it to World Cup, it went immediately faster, like 820s right out the gate. The car was just loving it. And I could tell on the dyno, when I overlaid dyno graphs and looked at stuff, I was like, the car's definitely making more power. It's going to be faster. I really think that 75 millimeter turbine was a choke point.
Okay.
And moving up to the 80 millimeter turbine really did help the car breathe a lot better. But these new next gen, especially the next gen RS2, are extremely badass turbos. So when people ask me, and I tell them what size the turbo is, they're typically like, totally don't get it. They're like, so it's only a 67, basically a 68 millimeter turbo, and you're like, yeah, well, with the next gen technology, it's a totally different turbo than what you expect. It acts like a much larger turbo in a lot of respects, because this is built to be class legal at 67.9 millimeter inducer size. So literally at World Cup, you have to take your compressor housing off, and they come over with their gauge that's already pre-drilled at 67.9 millimeters, just over that, like a few thousandths above that, and it has to slide over the inducer fins of the turbo wheel. If not, you're not legal.
Yeah.
So they build these turbos to be exactly legal and get every bit out of them. And these next gens feature those secondary inducer fins that pull air through the anti-surge groove. So the turbo acts a lot bigger than what it really is. It's a 67.9 inducer with a 102 millimeter exducer.
Just massive. And it kind of goes back to the point of, there's a reason why everyone wants a precision turbo. You can try and compete with a Garrett or a Comp, but you're just not going to make the same power, and all you're getting, you're just giving yourself a handicap for no reason. Whether you like it or not, precision just makes the most power.
In my testing, yes. I haven't found any turbos on the dyno that have been able to hold their own against a Precision turbo of the similar size. And I'm not sponsored by Precision.
Yeah.
I buy every single turbo, whether it's, for me or for a customer. I have no reason to say that other than I just haven't found one yet that can do it. Now, I haven't done extensive turbo testing, so there may be people out there that have engine dyno setups or something else where they've done a lot of extended testing that could refute what I'm saying with different brands like Zona or whoever that might make exotic turbos that do compete with Precision on this level. But I also love that Precision shows up to all these events with a big booth full of turbos. Like, it's not even a little section. It's like 3 booths long section of turbos and merchandise. And there's been plenty of times that they've helped racers out at the track who've had something go through their turbo or had a failure of some sort, that they have a turbo on site.
Like, okay, you need that, here it is.
Yeah.
And that's why people always say, to the rule of thumb is, like, if you have one of those turbos, don't modify, because if it does break, you can unbolt it, bolt the other one on. Like, don't modify. Like, a lot of people will take it for the intake side or for the juicer side of it and go like, oh, we'll just modify it so it turns down better. When you do that, it blows up. Now you can't just bolt another one on. So they're like, we have them here, don't mess with it. So we can just throw another one back on it. I guess the tran's blowing up and all that stuff.
Yeah, so the turbo's great. With the transmission, we were immediately faster, which immediately we found a limitation that we didn't know existed. I had never found this limitation before. Like I previously said, I did break an input shaft, but it was on the dyno. Yeah, it was on a big power pull that it just came apart at like 6,000 RPM. Okay, whatever, it must have been weak or damaged, but like, when we were at the tracks, I've never heard an input shaft on the car yet, up till that point. So maybe I did hurt it, just didn't break till it was on the dyno, I guess you could say that. But when we were at World Cup, I didn't break any input shafts. What happened was, down track, the bearings, there's a little roller bearing inside the torque converter. And at my power level, the way the torque converter works and the way these torque converters that I use are designed, I've been using FTI converters, and the guys over at FTI, Grant, has been great to me, but we found a limitation where the regular size Toyota A340 torque converter roller bearing is not able to live at that power level, and we're just we're finding a weak point that probably many didn't know was even there. In talking with Jason at ATF Speed, he says for sure he's had this issue with these type of bearings in A340 converters on Pedro's car. But if you're basically not running 8s or under, you don't really know this problem's there with the car. So we found this issue, and the torque converter came up, the bearing dropped out of it. It started to destroy itself and fell out of its bearing slot inside the torque converter. And so at the track, we swapped the transmission to my backup trans, which, again, shout out to ATF that they even rebuilt the one with the broken input shaft and got it back to me in time to throw it on the trailer the day before I left for World Cup to even have the backup trans with me. And so we threw that trans in with a fresh torque converter, went out there and made another record pass. And I only say record, and I know it's a micro record. Pedro's car was faster than A340, but Pedro always used nitrous, and much props to Pedro and his race setup, his team, everybody that's ever supported Pedro's a great guy. I love Pedro. His setup worked great. My setup is different, and it's only different because I can't use nitrous. Pedro was, Pedro loves nitrous. Anybody that knows Pedro knows he loves nitrous, and so nitrous was always a part of his car since it was running 9s. I don't think a lot of people realize that, but Pedro will be the first one to tell you he's been using nitrous with his setup since 9s. And obviously previous when he was on an A340, not now when he's on a TH400.
Right.
So, because I don't use nitrous, my car has to use a very high stall type converter. Pedro was able to use a much lower stall, a tighter converter, because he could get his turbo to come and light up with 100, 150 shot of nitrous and basically chemically induce displacement into the engine to make that turbo come on, which is awesome. You know, because usually when you leave, if you're only leaving at like 3,200 RPM, 3,500 RPM on a 2J with an auto trans, you're not making that much boost unless you have a pretty small turbo. My car leaves over 4,000 RPM usually, and I have to have RPM up to get the turbo on board.
Right. And
so that's kind of the difference why I'm calling it a micro record, right? Because my car is doing something with an A340 in a Supra chassis that was never done by anybody else, and it's not a big record, it's not an important record. Most people are gonna look right past it because it's not, you know, it's not the A340 record. It's just the little record of it. It does it without nitrous. It went this fast without nitrous, and I don't discredit that there are people that have been faster than it, so that's for sure.
The way I was put it too, when I still say street car, I mean, this still is full AC. I mean, when we go over it here, guys, it's still a full AC. I mean, it's literally the interior of it, besides having a cage and obviously a race bucket, but you could take that, put your stock seats in me. You wouldn't know this was not a street car. I mean, or it is a street car. I don't know why I keep saying it's not. Stock tank, correct?
Yeah, stock fuel tank.
Stock fuel tanks. Like
3 pumps in the hangar.
Yeah, like nothing's. I don't want to describe it. Like nothing's but 3.525s. Like a very just traditional, I would call it setup, right? That you see another Super owner have. It's just.
I use the Radium plumbing kit and the Radium hanger that I put in all our builds here in the shop. It's nothing different. Same fuel filter, same size lines.
Okay.
My car doesn't use bigger fuel lines. It's a -8 from the
Say that
hanger.
louder for everyone that says you need a -10. Say that a little louder for everyone.
It's a -8 from the hanger up to the filter and a -10 from the filter to the rail, which is also a -10 rail. I use a Ross Machine Racing manifold, so I use their fuel rail that works with their manifold.
Yep.
But yeah, it's -10 through there, back to the regulator, and then it's just a -6 return from the regulator back to the tank.
See, and that's awesome to hear that.
After the torque converter failure at World Cup, we had run an 825. We swapped trans, swapped converter, and went out there, and I think I don't know if we had one aborted run. I think we had one aborted run. Something, if I look back at the video, something was on the tire. There was like a pebble or a rock on the tire. You could see it in the video. It kind of like came off the tire, and so it kicked the tire right off the hit. So we just supported it because we had plenty of qualifiers, and we were already qualified well in the field
But you want to get some more testing in, you know, you're using the test passes.
So we just pulled it back in the pits. Didn't really change much after looking at the video because we realized there was something on the tire, and that's what happened. So we didn't really make much changes. The 825 pass, it wheelied. So I did make a suspension adjustment as well after that pass, where I added some rebound dampening in the front to slow the front down so it didn't wheelie anymore. I mean, they look super cool, but they're also super destructive, and they definitely don't win races. No. So I got it ironed out. We went back out there on the next qualifier and went to 821 at 172, which was great. And the track was just on point. I didn't have enough time testing this car with this turbo setup. Like I said, I literally got to the track with it right off the dyno, and our qualifiers were the test passes with the car. And I know everyone's kind of there doing the same thing anyway, but we just literally didn't know what the car was going to do with this much power because it had never had this much power before getting to World Cup. So when I got there, we went out there on right after the 825 pass. I made those suspension adjustments. We went out there and ran an 821 at 172 exactly dead nuts on. The car stayed down. It did exactly what it should. Threw the chute at the end. Everything was perfect. And then the car stalled at the end of the drag strip. Like right after I slowed down and came off to a stop and was pulling off, it just died. And we were like, I was like, no, not again. And I got it started back up. I put my parachute in the trunk, and then I got it fired back up, but I had to keep my foot on the gas to keep it alive. And I was like, yeah, I know something's bound up. Something's not happy today. So we got back to the pits and realized that yet again the torque converter failed. Yet again the bearing was destroyed in the torque converter and was causing friction, you know, between the engine and the input shaft of the transmission. So it was like your clutch was partially on all the time on a stick car. Yeah. And so we were going to call it we were qualified number 4 in the field at that point. At one point we were like the number 2 qualifier, but a few people did better after that. So we ended up being number 4 with an 821. And I was talking with Vlad from National Speed and a couple other guys, and I was like, man, I don't know if I should just put it on the trailer. What should I do? I'm like, you know, I kind of slept on it, and the next day I was just like, no, I'm sending it. No matter what, I'm sending it.
You qualified. You got to at least try.
I got to at least go down the drag strip after qualifying, like in competition. I made it all the way here. I don't have any parts to fix my car. I've already spent X amount of time with Jason from ATF and other people, like just talking about the transmission and if there's anything that we could possibly do, but nobody has a torque converter that I need. Screw it. I'm just going to send it. So I literally went into the tune. I turned the idle up to like 1500 commanded and got it fired up and, you know, moved my idle air control table so that the car would just sit there and idle at like 1500 RPM. So, because as soon as I put it in gear and that friction between the input shaft would happen, it used to stall it right away. Now, it would just bog it really hard, but then it would kind of relearn, you know, the PID controller for the IAC would take over and start ramping more in, and it would stay alive and not die. And I was like, you know what? We're sending it. So we went out there. The car wasn't really happy, but the eliminations round number 1. There was a Neon SRT4, really nice race car next to me. His name's Bradley, and I think he's out of Virginia. And we did a 843 pass, so the car lost some mile an hour, and it lost some. It wasn't happy. it didn't like not having a properly functioning torque converter. But we won the race, and as right about just past the 1,000-foot mark, I'm steamrolling up top, mile an hour wise, and all of a sudden it's just smoke, and immediately I smelled it. I pulled my chute as quick as I could, and I was like, oh no, something has really, really come apart this time.
Yeah.
Because I could smell the trans fluid. All the smoke was trans fluid.
Yeah.
And it actually pulled the pilot bushing out of the transmission pump that the hub of the torque converter slides into. It came all the way out. So I think there was so much heat probably being created in the torque converter, it probably got larger than it used to be and grabbed the bushing and pulled it out of the pump. So that's the best thing I can really come up with, but it was failure beyond repair. So after it blew all the trans fluid out all over the track and made everybody angry at me, my crew members came down and I threw my chute in the back. Everything was covered in trans oil. We were all just, talking about, well, it is what it is. And then the guy with the neon came up and said, man, not great pass. Is everything going to be okay with the car? And I said, nah, it was hurt before. We just wanted to make a pass because we didn't know this was going to happen. If I knew that it was going to oil down the track, I would have never made a pass, for the record. I wouldn't have never done that.
Yeah.
It had never done that before this. The car's never oiled down a track, but it did that time at the 1,000-foot mark, and you're really going fast. So you don't know it's going to do it, and when it does it, all you can do is let out, pull the chute, and
hope for the best.
Hope for the best, because you're going really fast at the 1,000-foot mark.
Fluid coming out of your rear tires. I'm just glad you didn't wreck. That's my big thing.
Yeah. So I told him no. We knew the torque converter was hurt, but we were packing our stuff back up. Bradley comes over to me and he says, hey man, is the car okay? And I said, no, car's not going to make it. Obviously I didn't have any parts. We knew we didn't have any parts before we ever made that pass, so it was like, okay, we're done here. Like, this is where it goes on the trailer. It won its first round ever of eliminations at World Cup, and I'll be okay with that. I'm going to hang my hat on that. I'll be back next year. This was a great accomplishment. The car's only been together for a few months, and I'm good with that. And Bradley's like, would you consider like skipping the scales? And for those of you who don't know what he's talking about when he asked me that, he's asking me if I'll disqualify myself. Yeah. Because if you miss a weigh-in after any pass during eliminations or qualifying, really for that matter, it's really enforced in eliminations, right? But any pass you make during eliminations at World Cup, you have to scale the car. Your car has to weigh a certain amount. If it doesn't, you're cheating. You can weigh more than you need to weigh, but you can't weigh less than what you need to weigh. So, because both cars made a pass, and even though my car was a faster car, if I disqualified myself after the race, he would still get the run. He would basically get the win anyway by disqualification.
So you could at least continue to race,
right? Because it's like if my car was too heavy, then they would disqualify me and give him the win automatically. Well, if you skip the scales, it's basically admitting that you're too heavy, which my car was not too heavy. But I thought about it for a second while we're literally pushing the car, like me and 4 other people are just pushing the car, 3 other people, and I was like, you know what, man, I'm going to skip the scales. Yeah. We were pushing it, I said I would think about it to him, and when I started getting closer to the weigh station, I was just like, man, what am I going to do? I know I won the race, he knows I won the race, what am I going to prove to anybody else by kicking him out? He worked so hard to get here. Everybody has. Oh, you're such a good guy. No, seriously, that's pretty awesome. Because now the guy gets another chance. I was like, in the heat of the moment, you're at the end of the track, and you're just like, nah, I won. Yeah. You're not going to take my win away. I won at World Cup. I won 1 round of elimination, but I won a legitimate race at World Cup that I worked hard to be here for. But then it's like, yeah, but he worked just as hard as you did to get his race car ready to be here. Why am I going to basically give somebody in the next round of eliminations a broke bye.
Yeah.
If I disqualify myself, he goes on to race. And so I did. I skipped the weigh station, and he got on to the next round. So now, after World Cup, I sent the transes off, and we've been looking forward to next year. We're now 2024. I'm really excited about this year's program. Powerhouse has been on board with me. Titan's been on board with me. But this year, Brian Crowers stepped up and jumping on board with the car. So we're really, really excited. We're building another short block for the car. My guys over at Perfect Circle Engines with the cylinder heads are stepping up too. We're just, the car's only going to get better this coming year. We're really looking to push it deep into the sevens. As fast as we can go is as fast as we want to go. But I think realistically, if we can make a car that goes like 760s to 80s, at least we could move up to the next class of Super Street and at least be competitive at World Cup. But it would also just, my own personal goal for the car was always to run a 7 with an A340 and no nitrous. We've got the turbo technology. The car already mile an hour is enough to go a 7. We just didn't have enough testing time to get there last year. But I really think this year, with the new torque converter setup that Jason's building over at ATF, and the new setup is going to go faster. I'm confident that we're going to do better this year. And so moving into 2024, first goal is go a 7. After that, it's hit as many race events as the car will live.
Sure.
My wife and I are due in September, so we're going to try to get it in. We're going to try to get the racing in as much as we can, and we're going to see how World Cup can go this year in November with a new baby, if that's going to work or not. But, truly, the car needs to get out there. It needs to do some testing, and then it needs to get down to events. So That's our goal with the car this year, is actually run a decent season if we can, and just keep going with it. Keep pushing the A340 platform as hard as we can.
Now, you spoke about a little bit there about the Brian Crowder stuff. So what is going to be the engine, trans package, rear end, turbo? What do you plan now? Turbo probably going to change, but what kind of engine setup and trans are we going to run for this year? I know you said ATF, A340, but is that getting different modifications? Let's kind of talk about that here.
So Jason at ATF is doing a little bit of, I think he's doing a few custom tweaks to the valve body this year to kind of change some pressures to what he wants. It's really nice to work with a trans builder that has that much technology at their fingertips, that they can play with all these things and make feedback adjustments and talk things through and get this done. And so he's doing some testing on that stuff. We may ultimately scrap all that and just run it the way right out of the box the stage 4s are all set up.
Sure.
But with the new torque converter setup, we're kind of thinking maybe we'll do some custom tweaks in the valve body to see if the new torque converter that he's building, we can really optimize everything. So we're excited to move forward on the transmission side of it and keep the A340 platform alive with that. The engine setup is going to be a Brian Crowder 3/4 stroker crankshaft, Brian Crowder MOAR rods. It's going to more than likely have ACL bearings. Same cylinder head setup that I have in the cylinder head, which is my stage 3 cylinder head package, which is a full CNC port, full valve train, no oversized valves. They're not really needed anyway, but at this level especially not. The upgraded Inconel exhaust valves, dual valve springs, Brian Crowder 276 cams, stage 3 plus, same cams that Ryan runs in his car or in this car. The whole setup's pretty simple. It runs it doesn't run any exotic parts.
That's what I want to get at. So a lot of this, and it's not to diminish anything, but it's off-the-shelf parts, right? I mean, besides some of the stuff maybe tweaking from ATF, but everything else is going to be just stuff you get off the shelf, right? And you're putting it together. It shows that anyone else could do this.
And the only reason that there's any tweaking from ATF is because we're prototyping.
Right, exactly.
We might need to make tweaks only because going to be one of the few people in the world that has this torque converter, and we got to know what's going to work, because ultimately the goal is they will sell it to their customers. And by the time it goes out to regular customers as an order right off their website, we will have ironed out the kinks, and they will know exactly what tweaks needed to have been made to make this work correctly, and then there won't be any more tweaks.
Right.
They'll just, they'll ship stage 4s set up for that torque converter.
Perfect.
They won't be shipping them out for the old style torque converters.
All right, so now let's go over the engine head program here. So we've got a customer engine here, which we can go over, but give me a little bit of detail what your program is and what you guys offer.
Yeah, so we offer multiple different stage packages of both short blocks, cylinder heads, and then fully assembled long blocks.
Okay, so for that, you have different stages. So you got your stage 1, you say you have 2 and 3. So if I went to stage 1, what am I going to get in that?
Your stage 1 is sort of your budget-friendly option, where it's going to be a good set of forged pistons and rods, ARP main studs in the short block, and I conservatively rate those to be in the up to 900 wheel horsepower range. Anything beyond that, I really recommend going into the billet main cap setup, which would be my stage 2. So a stage 2, even in the stage 1, I do an upgrade to the wrist pin, but in the stage 2, I do even heavier duty wrist pins than that. We go to a CP piston instead of a Wiseco, which is just a little bit heavier duty piston. We go to the BC Pro H rods with 625 rod bolts and billet main caps with ARP main studs. So
those are both pretty beefy, 1 and 2, and then you said 3 is kind of all out, but there's no like cookie cutter way of going about it.
Yeah, a 3 would be anything that's north of there. So if we're going to do DLC coatings on anything, if we're going to do anything custom gas porting, basically anything that's not going to be right off the shelf, and or anything with a billet crank. So if we're going to move to the billet crank, whether you want to go to a 90 millimeter stroke for a 3.2 or a 94 millimeter stroke for a 3.4, or even the 3.5 or 3.6 options that are on the market, that's going to be a stage 3 setup. We're really going to have to pick custom parts for that, because when you move to the stroker, you're going to usually you're going to have to change either the rod length or the piston compression height, which generally you're just going to change the piston compression height. So you're going to need a different set of pistons than your standard off-the-shelf 2JZ pistons.
So that's the end-all be okay. That could be the crazy, like you said, 3.4. You could have a high compression, high revving 3.0 set up with a lightweight crank. It could be just about anything.
The stage 1 and stage 2 offerings that I usually have in stock, most of the stage 1 stuff's about 8.5 to 8.8 to 1 compression. All my stage 2 setups are about 9 to 1 compression. I want them to be friendly on pump gas, but ready to make good jam on ethanol, and really just make a little bit more just on the base engine, just out of the short block, than what you would get from like an 8 to 1 factory short block.
Okay. Now, obviously, we've got this. We see the big, beautiful precision here. What is this beside you here? What would you consider this build here?
So this is a stage 2 long block. So it's a CP piston. 250 wall, 9310 alloy wrist pins. It's got billet mains, Pro H rods from Brian Crower, 625 rod bolts. So the short block is rated to, around 1300 is what I pretty much rate my stage 2 stuff to. I'm not saying you can't make more on it, and I know there will be some who have, but I'm pretty conservative on what I rate this stuff to, just because I don't want anybody, I never want to sell somebody the wrong thing.
Sure.
This is also a stage 2 cylinder head, which put together like this is a complete assembly, but if you took the manifolds off it and the accessories, it would be just a long block. And so it's basically my stage 2 long block that's fully dressed. So you could call it a stage 2 complete engine assembly. Yeah.
I mean, just look at it, guys. So that's what I wanted to go over here. And again, you're just you just built added to this little room here, which is nice. So you have a dedicated room just for doing this. We got another engine here, head obviously that you were working on. Is that something that you're just assembling now, or what's going on with this?
Yeah, I disassembled that head. It was off of this short block right here. came out of a customer vehicle, and I put it back together so that I could safely store it back in one of the Toyota cylinder head boxes and not have the buckets fall out of it. So that's why it's got
paper in it.
Yeah, that's why I just roll up the paper and pretend that they're camshafts so that the buckets don't fall out if the box gets flipped over or something like that. And then so that cylinder head and that cylinder head down there are both used GTE heads, and they'll go up into storage and then probably get sent out in my next batch of cylinder heads to the machine shop. I offer used cores and I have new cores in stock. So if somebody wants to order, you know, a new head, their preference is to have a brand new head out of the box, then I'm always trying to accommodate having a brand new option. Some people are you know, pretty particular about that, and I feel you, because that's what I use on my race car too. I don't use any used cylinder head, so I get it, and so I offer both. Slightly different price point, obviously, because a new head is worth more money than a used core.
The one thing I wanted to bring with this, as you guys see, since he's building engines, it truly is a one-stop shop. Let's say someone like weld, you could build the engine, you could tune the car, you could literally we just built the diff, you can literally do everything in one-stop shop, which is very hard to find these days. So guys, again, this just shows like you could drop your car off here, get everything you need done, and then Alex is the one that takes care of it. So thank you again, man. I appreciate all this, and yeah, you the man.